And let me cut this Bluetooth off. What in the hell's going on here? I see Jason in the background. Let me cut this Bluetooth off, and we may cut it back on. Hey, what's up? We got Jason in the audience here. Let me change the layout here. What's up, Jason? Man,
Hey,
I've been wanting to interview you for a long time. You probably have gotten some of my messages where I reached out to you. I said, hey, let's do an interview together. I would love to talk to you about the Unite the Right rally and all those things. So I'm glad to have you here. Glad to have you here. Well, why don't you tell the audience now? We're mirroring to my other channel, but we're keeping the comments here kind of clean. So this is kind of on our Clips channel. So why don't you start off by telling the audience all about you? Maybe start at the Unite the Right Charlottesville.
well, I'm a journalist, author, and activist from Charlottesville, Virginia. I was the permit holder for the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, which was a major international story, one of the major flashpoints of the first Trump administration. I wrote a book about that experience, Charlottesville and the Death of Free Speech. I'm also I also do news and opinion columns for outlets including Daily Caller, VDare, and Countercurrents.
You know, VDare is no
I'm
longer.
also hosting a live weekly show at Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m. EST called Future Shock, and that deals with basically the intersection of white identity politics and the cyberpunk dystopia. That's
You
why I have
know,
all these lights in here. It's supposed to be like a cyberpunk theme.
this is a little bit off topic, I know, from what people want to talk about, but you mentioned VDare, and VDare is no longer anymore.
Yeah, they faced some legal persecution. They haven't been charged with anything, but they formed their nonprofit as an educational institute in the state of New York long time ago, before all of this wokeness and cancel culture and so forth. And at some point, they bought a castle in historic Berkeley Springs, West Virginia. And they did that to basically have a conference center where political radicals could drive from DC, for instance, and have a place that they could go to hold their conferences, First Amendment protected activity, without the venue canceling on them or whatever. But
Yeah.
these people in New York, led by Letitia James, who's going after Donald Trump as well, decided to launch an investigation into them and whether they were living in the castle. I've been there a number of times. They're not living in the castle. They have their own home that they live in. But nevertheless, they've spent like $1 million
Yeah.
on legal fees, and it's destroyed their small business. And VDare had to shut down.
Yeah. I was showing my website there. I used to read VDare all the time. Uh, was the talk? No, the talk was published in Tacky. You remember the talk by Bert Derbyshire? Do you remember that?
Uh, yeah, I think so. Can you refresh my memory?
James Derbyshire wrote an article called "The Talk." You never heard of it before?
It's about race, right? It's about
Yeah,
blacks and whites.
yeah. And he said it's the talk that whites should give their parents. You never heard this before?
Yeah, I have heard of it.
Yeah, okay. So I think he was at Tacky or Uns or somewhere when he wrote that article. It was a very interesting article. Hey, so let's jump right into Charlottesville. What do you think about that?
Sure, whatever you want to talk about.
Was Charlottesville a test run for January 6th?
I think so in a lot of ways. The main thing that they have in common is that they took place in a overwhelmingly Democrat jurisdiction where the Democrats control law enforcement, the prosecutors, everything. So they they can create whatever situation they want and then frame it by prosecuting only one side to fit their narrative. And in Charlottesville, the police intentionally stood down because they didn't want the protest to take place. That was how they sabotaged it, because they knew there were going to be Antifa and Black Lives Matter and other radical left groups that were intending to use violence to shut down the rally. And then they could use that violence as a pretext to disband the rally before anybody got to speak. And then when you had the inevitable fights that broke out, they only prosecuted one side of that. And a similar thing happened in D.C. from my perspective. I was actually at January 6th as well. And what it looked like to me was that it was a protest that got out of hand, like Charlottesville. You had people of varying levels of political extremism, I guess you could say. I think most of them were not extremists. They were just normal Trump supporters, although you did have like some QAnon and different crazy people there as well. But, Trump had requested National Guard support to prevent any violence from breaking out, and Nancy Pelosi denied him. There are many videos of the protesters being ushered into the U.S. Capitol grounds by the Metro Police. So they wanted that to happen. What's more, they had orders to allow that to happen. And then, of course, just like at Charlottesville, they did this one-sided dragnet of charges and prosecutions to enforce their one-sided narrative and essentially lock people up for their political beliefs.
Now, race is a big topic in America, and a lot of people like to point. A lot of Black people like to say they're racially taken advantage of or whatever. But in this case, in Charlottesville, it was a Black police chief, right?
There probably still is a Black police chief, because at some point the white liberals who were in charge of Charlottesville just decided that it would be politically incorrect to have a white person as the chief of police. So they've gone from one person of color to another ever since I moved there in my adult life.
Do you think he was kind of happy with? I heard them let them fight so we can get rid of the permits and like that. A Black guy probably not inclined to your message would be probably okay with the carnage to get rid of your protest. You think that's fair to say?
Well, it's a very complicated situation, and I go into all of the nuance in my book. And it's difficult to tell where the police chief was coming from. He gave me the impression that he wanted to maintain law and order, and that he had a plan. But there was a lot of backstage drama going on, where these city councilors, led by the Jewish mayor Mike Signer, decided that they didn't want this rally to happen. So they canceled the permit and barred the police from talking about security measures with me, even though we were still going to protest one way or the other, permit or no. And we had a federal lawsuit in which I was represented by the ACLU. So there was a good chance that we were going to have the permit reinstated, but they leaned on this guy. There was a Black city manager as well. The city manager is actually the head of the show.
Mayor. Right.
Not
Person
the mayor.
Right.
But these were pretty intelligent, like calm guys. I would say they were not the most radical Black people. There was a vice mayor named Wes Bellamy who was very radical.
Yeah, he's radical. Wes Bellamy. Radical.
But I mean, it's safe to say that they still probably had some kind of left-wing beliefs, definitely race loyalty. And when they got leaned on by these very hard left city councilors, I think that they eventually just did what they were asked to do and sabotaged.
Yeah, Wes Bellamy was very race radical, if I'm not mistaken. If my memory serves me correctly, he was on the city council or something. He was like not a Barack Obama, but a very race first type of guy.
Yeah, he went to an all-Black university and just had a very radical ideology. He came to Charlottesville from out of town. He was a carpetbagger, and he was taken under the wing by this white liberal woman named Kristen Zakos, who was also on the Charlottesville City Council. And Kristen Zakos had been trying to get rid of this Confederate memorial to Robert E. Lee that had been in the Charlottesville downtown park forever, since the early 1900s. But it wasn't very popular, and people just kind of like waved her off. Why is this white liberal woman making such a big deal about this when black people don't really seem to care? Because people of all races would hang out in that park. To be frank, there were a lot of bums. People were there like smoking weed, drinking beer, or whatever.
You talking about in that little square, right there, right there in the little square? Like, is that downtown Charlottesville?
Yeah, it's just a park, it's a square
Right.
park right
Right.
next to the library, and one street over from the Charlottesville downtown mall, which is this red bricked walkway that's for the most part closed off to traffic, other than a couple of lanes that intersect it. And she basically wanted a black face to this campaign to remove these Confederate memorials. So she recruited two people. She recruited a young woman named Ziana Bryant, a very big, like huge fat woman, and got her to write these letters, these editorials to the paper. And then she also got Wes Bellamy, who brought this very different energy than she had. She's kind of a frail, snooty, like I said, overeducated white liberal woman. And then Wes Bellamy was kind of brought like a more masculine, radical, and ethnic energy to it. And they were trying to sort of rally the black community against the monument, and therefore to indirectly reach the other white liberals, because the white liberals didn't care unless they were super radical, because even the black people didn't care. So they were trying to stir up racial resentment over the statue so that they could make a change. But actually, my first moment in the public spotlight was uncovering these tweets that Wes Bellamy had put out, because he was framing himself as being anti-racist. He wanted to take down the statue because he's against racism. But he had all tweets that were like, white people are the devil. I hate seeing white people around town. Just on and on and on. And so for me, that was confirmation that it wasn't that he was trying to prevent racism. It was that he was racist himself. And he was not only going after Robert E. Lee. He said Thomas Jefferson is next. Thomas Jefferson is the figurehead there in Charlottesville. His Monticello home is a major tourist destination. He founded the University of Virginia, which is the major economic and employment driver in the area.
Yeah, that's where you went to school, right? You went to UVA, right?
Yes.
And I was telling people early on the stream, UVA is like a private public school. Would you say?
Yeah, it's a nice school. I started out at VCU in Richmond, doing film and photography. But I just, I was just having issues. I guess I was partying too much. I took time off and traveled. And when I came back to university, I just had a totally different energy, a different perspective. And I went into psychology. I wasn't at UVA for a long time because I already had a bunch of credits. I was kind of up that bachelor's degree.
So what got you into is it activism or, what made the worm turn for you?
Well, my perspective started to change around, I guess, 2015 or so, maybe shortly before Donald Trump announced his candidacy for the presidency. And I was left-leaning. I was never really focused on race so much. I was more concerned about things like the Iraq War. I felt that was a very immoral war that we were manipulated into under false pretenses. But I would listen to NPR, which I didn't recognize was had a liberal slant at the time. I thought they were just, highly educated, people giving unbiased news. But they started doing all these stories about what they were portraying as these innocent black men who were shot by cops when they weren't doing anything wrong at all. And at first, I was on board with that. I remember when the Trayvon Martin thing happened, I accepted that framing of it, and I was upset that Zimmerman was acquitted. But when they just kept happening, I started thinking, wait a second, this narrative is implausible. Why are cops supposedly doing this all of a sudden? It couldn't be that they're doing it all of a sudden. It must be that the media is deciding to portray it this way in a consistent campaign to agitate and stir up racial grievance. I also know, just from my personal experience, I've been around the block a lot.
What do you mean by that? You got to speak bluntly here. What do you mean you've been around the block? Tell us what that means.
I mean, I just know that, like I said, when I was at VCU, I probably partied a little bit too much. I've been around tough people. I've had friends of all different races. And I know that black people are not the angels that the NPR hosts were presenting them as. I know that there is a higher crime rate amongst the black population.
Now we get somewhere.
And some of the details in these stories just didn't correspond with the narrative, like the fact that who was it? Michael Brown was reaching for the cop's gun, but
hands up, don't shoot.
Yeah, they created a myth around the hands up, don't shoot.
Yeah.
And even more recently, I mean, this is long after I was red pilled on race, but I mean, the George Floyd thing also had a lot of issues. They keep taking these guys who are definitely career criminals, dangerous people, and portraying them as if they're innocent. So that started to change my mind, and I felt like there was a lot of anti-white discrimination. For example, I'd worked my butt off and gone in debt to get a college degree. And as a psychology major at the bachelor level, you pretty much have to get a job working for the government, doing like counseling or social work or whatever. And I could not get a job to save my life. People were getting hired over me because they chucked certain identity boxes that didn't have the college degree. I had actually worked in a center where I was helping people with drug and mental health problems. So I had years of experience and the education. I was like, you're kidding me, but they don't want to hire a white man to do that stuff. So I was kind of relegated to the underground, doing stuff in the gig economy, handyman work or whatever. And I was very resentful about that discrimination.
Michael Savage spoke about this. I don't know if you've ever heard Michael Savage speak about this. He calls it like his birthright being stolen. He talked about working in social service agencies, helping the poor, and he'd go home and sleep on the floor while helping them get a fully furnished apartment. And you've kind of described something similar. Anyway, you ever listen to Michael Savage, by the way?
I don't really listen to the radio that much. When I was living in D.C., I would listen to it more because I liked Rush Limbaugh. But once Rush Limbaugh died, there was just no one else like him for me. So I kind of lost interest in it.
So tell me, let's get into race here. What are your thoughts on race here? I was looking at some of your tweets. I'm pretty open about race. I don't know if you watched any of my videos. I deal with blacks quite a bit. And so, I have a very realistic point of view about blacks that many blacks don't like to hear. So I'm hoping we can have an honest conversation here. You can feel free to be honest with me. What are your thoughts on blacks and just politically everything? Just open question here.
Well, it's a very complicated thing. I think that to understand the differences between blacks and whites, we first have to accept that there are biological, racial differences between people that have consequences for how people behave, and that it affects them politically. It affects the rates of crime. It affects IQ. It affects aggressiveness. And there's variations amongst all the races of mankind on that. I don't think it's all like uniformly bad. Some people are better, black people are really good at certain athletic
Mm-hmm.
competitions. Kenyans from Africa are really good runners, and it's not just because people value running in Kenya. It's because of their bone structure, and it's
Mm-hmm.
their DNA, which gives them a competitive advantage
I
there.
hear something about their lungs too. That they can run longer distances. Something about their lungs. But go ahead. Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely something that's going on. I think also that there is a disparity between whites and blacks and how they behave politically, because blacks are very comfortable having race loyalty, and they see their blackness as an important part of their identity. I mean, and I'm not just talking about, activist black people. I'm talking about, I just go to the grocery store,
Mm.
and recently I saw a couple black people. There are not many black people where I live now in West Virginia, but they see each other and they're like, "My beautiful black man," or whatever. And I don't resent
Man.
them for that. I'm like, why can't white people um, love one another in that same way and have race loyalty? White people are actually the only group that, to some extent, has a negative opinion of their own kind. And I don't think that that's natural. I think that that is propaganda that's been drilled into their head, self-loathing. It's been a turn since World War II, after the Nazis and everything. There was this concerted effort to demonize white identity, and we're living with the results of the people who have had basically what you could call communist indoctrination to hate themselves for a very long time. So we're not able to really stand up for ourselves properly. And we've just given away the farm, where we're letting in people from all over the world to just take over our birthright, not only in the United States, but in our indigenous homelands in Europe. And if we're going to survive, we have to fight that. And that's the basis of all of my political philosophy right there.
In my opinion, I think the blacks are being used as like a pit bull. Some people say it's the Jewish people that use them to foment, somewhat like revolutions, George Floyd and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on that? I see you tweet a bit about like the Jewish people.
Well, there's no doubt about it that the Jewish people have had a role in that. If you look at, figures like you mentioned, Martin Luther King,
Mm.
he was being guided by Jewish activists who were writing some of his speeches, and they saw a very talented, charismatic public speaker, and they put these radical words in his mouth, basically, and made sure that their media allies were there to make him the person that he is. And they do that over and over and over again. It's not that all Jews are left wing, but they're predominantly left wing. They, I think, voted 80% for Kamala Harris in this recent election. They tend to concentrate in major urban centers, which are just left wing in general. So some of it would be environmental, because they, concentrate in New York City and Moscow. In Moscow, that's where they spearheaded the Bolshevik
Yeah,
movement.
I've talked about it. Yeah.
They were behind communism. They were behind the civil rights era, and a lot of different things. It's not that all Jews are that way, but they are a pretty politically powerful group. They are the most powerful ethnic bloc in America. It's not white people. It's definitely Jews.
Will you debate?
Yeah, in a number of ways. I had a lot of censorship and deplatforming right after the rally, as you could imagine, and it subsided a little bit, but PayPal closed down my account. So that's been a major pain in the butt because, if I try to go and pay for services, sometimes web hosting or whatever, they only let you pay through PayPal. And so PayPal's banned me from using it. I had Bank of America at one point, and they just up and canceled my bank account out of blue, saying that I was a risk. But the risk was all prejudice towards my political views. That's all it was. I'm not a gangster or a drug dealer or something. I'm not a terrorist.
Because I saw your clip and you say you're back on YouTube now, so you must have been kicked off at some point.
Yeah, I was kicked off for a long, long time, and that was in the lead up to the Unite the Right 2 rally that you might remember in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
That was when I had just moved up there. I didn't know that I was going to put down roots there, but you turn on the radio and they were talking about it like it was an upcoming terrorist attack, just really winding people up. And all we were planning to do is just march and give some speeches. Sorry, what was the question again?
Damn, I forget now. Well, I got other questions for you. Well, there's one on the screen. What are your thoughts on Gobino? I don't know. Gobino.
I don't recognize that name.
Okay. Here's another question.
Arthur de Gobineau. It says a French writer and diplomat. I guess I should look into him, but I haven't done enough reading on the old classics. I know there was a lot more frank discussion of race back in the day in a way that we don't really have anymore, certainly not from mainstream publishers. I was reading one about the revolution in Haiti, which was kind of an interesting racial flashpoint, because I'm interested in the French Revolution as well. The French Revolution was a very dark period in European history from my perspective, when these left-wing radicals took over one of the most prestigious and historic nations in Europe. And then it was replicated in Haiti using the same ideology, the whole idea of republicanism and liberty and so forth. But it took on a very, very racial characteristic, as you can imagine, because you had these black former slaves killing the whites, often plantation owners who were in the minority in that country.
What are your thoughts on American Extremists? Have you read that? About Josh Neal? I've never heard of that before.
No, I haven't. It sounds like something that like an Antifa aligned person must have written.
What do you think about Antifa, by the way? Do you think there's like a government like backed group, or you think it's just organic?
Well, they're very mentally unwell people. I think the term extremist does click for that group of people. I've spent a lot of time observing them. They have a lot of transsexuals and other what I would consider weirdos. They hate white people very much, even though most of them are white. A lot of times they come from middle class, upper middle class, and even upper class backgrounds. I've done a number of articles exposing some of these people, and it's very often the case that they are very privileged people. I mean, some of them are the children of CEOs, like major executives at places like Netflix and all kinds of places. And yet they do this champagne socialism stuff and call for revolution and so forth. The Virginia Senator Tim Kaine, his son Woody is one of them.
Someone asked in the earlier chat leading up to this, what is the problem with white people? Like, why have they lost so much ground here?
It's intentional. Like I said, after World War II, there was an attempt to reshape society, and a lot of it was led by Jews. Now, if you were taking the Jewish perspective on it, they felt like they were victimized in World War II and killed because of their race or whatever. And I guess they decided, well, this is not happening again. So the way that they're going to deal with it is by any means necessary. So you've seen like what they did in Palestine is they just started buying up the land and they kicked all of these Arabs off the land, and they have no problem killing them in brutal ways that are reminiscent of the violence in World War II itself. In America, it's more like they work their way into positions of power in certain industries like Hollywood, for instance. The entertainment industry is heavily Jewish, and they created sort of a shadow America, which was an alternative to America that was created through their films, you know, where they gradually pushed degeneracy all the way up until today, where they were just, you know, pushing the envelope as much as they could within the context of the time towards this radical goal. And a big part of that was deracinating white people. It wasn't just Jews, of course. There were many white collaborators, of course, black people as well. I mean, people of all races. But there was this, you know, ideology which melded racial values with communism. So what you have now is race communism. They wanted to sort of level the playing field as they saw it between everybody. And the way to do that was to kneecap white people. And they've just created this really effective shaming propaganda, because white people are actually really good people for the most part. Not all of them, but the mainstream you know, Main Street white person in small town America or whatever has a good heart. And so if you are just constantly telling them that they're bad and they're racist, even when they're not, even when you just want something from them, you want them to roll over to give you political power, they have done that. And it's a damn shame. We've got to toughen up, or we're going to lose everything.
So you think other races are like taking advantage of your good heart, to paraphrase, the white race's kind of good heart?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's not that I'm sure that there are lots of people of other races who have a good heart and good values and so on and so forth. But I know from my experience that white people do, that we're a kind-hearted people, and we've just given away so much. I mean, you look at, for instance, the empires that we had, just merely because the British felt bad about being colonizers, they gave up India and parts of the Middle East, you know, you name it. They just gave it away because they felt like it would be in the best interest of the people who lived there. And here in America, we've constantly done that. And we, no matter how much money we put into education in inner cities, no matter how much money we put into welfare benefits, it doesn't really seem to bridge all of these gaps that the liberals say that it's going to. There's still a difference in crime rates, still a difference in educational attainment, blah, blah, blah. But the fact that it fails through the propaganda is used as further reinforcement of this mythical systemic white supremacy. Like if you deny that there's any racial differences biologically, culturally between people, the only alternative is that it's coming from the outside, in other words, from the system. But I reject that, and I think that it's clear that these liberal policies that have spent so much money trying to engineer people to be exactly the same have failed because they're based on a false premise.
What do you think about, you spoke about, white people have given up so much. What do you think about the interracial dating thing? Like whenever
I'm opposed to it.
I figured you would be opposed to it. But when you see it like bombarded every day, day in and day out, like what are your thoughts? Like what do you think this is headed?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of people who do hate whites, and they're trying to decrease our population. And a good way to do that is to prevent white people from hooking up and having families and all of that, repopulating. So we're attacked in a number of different ways. They encourage white couples not to have children, and they only do it for white people. That kind of messaging is never promoted to anybody else. There's a constant promotion of the interracial stuff, particularly black men and white women. Like it's a joke. I have a video I did a while ago about how they're trying to engineer this stuff subliminally. Like in the dating apps, for instance, like they will penalize you if you are a white person who does not select black people or whatever, make it so you don't get any matches at all, because they detect that, and they'll try and steer white people towards picking people of color as their partners. And we don't get a say in that. They choose characteristics on a lot of these apps. Like you can choose height, you can choose income, but a lot of them won't let you choose race.
Hey, let me ask you this question, because people want to know: do you date outside of your race?
Not anymore. I didn't always have these political values. So I'm not saying that I've never dated anybody outside my race, but with the values that I have now, I would not do it again. I just, I wasn't red pilled to my current values. And I think that it's incredibly important to have white babies because our population is under threat.
I agree with you. I think, honestly, and I've said this many times, I think black and white people have more in common than, say, black and brown people. But yet you hear blacks talking about their black and brown coalition. And I say, you look around you, there is no black and brown coalition. But I think blacks see themselves only in competition with white people, and they're not winning. And that makes them angry, and they blame racism and whatever other reasons behind it. I don't know what you think. What do you think about that?
Well, I think when you have a multiracial society, it's always going to have what you could call supremacism. I mean, this is modern lingo, but it's the parlance of the time. A lot of leftists claim that this is a white supremacist system. A lot of white nationalists would counter, no, it's actually a Jewish supremacist system, because those are the people who are actually in power and they're not actually white. But I think regardless, the way human beings act, just like any other animal, is they're struggling for dominance. They tribe up. Not all people act that way, because people are very diverse temperamentally and intellectually and so on and so forth. But one group will always come out on top. And that's why I support nationalism. I think that it's good. You should have countries where people are who want to live in a racially diverse society can be. That's fine. But I also think you should be able to have black nationalists and white nationalist countries where people who want to be with their own kind and realize a vision for their people, where they have sovereignty. And I think a lot of black people are frustrated by not having that, because they will always be comparing themselves to white people or maybe to Jews.
They never compare themselves to Jews. It's only white people. It's only white people they compare themselves to, in my opinion.
They think that the Jews are white, though. Most people aren't aware enough to know them.
What are your thoughts about? We cover a lot of crime and violence in mostly inner cities here, and it's mostly black. Give me your stream of consciousness on that.
Can you repeat the question?
We talk a lot about the crime and violence here on this channel. Primarily, it's all black, right? And real bad black crime, and it's become younger and younger. I don't know if you've noticed that pattern. What are your thoughts on that, and why blacks seem to not want to try to solve it? They don't even want to talk about it. It's my opinion. They don't want to talk about it. What do you think?
Well, I think that there's something of a genetic predisposition to that behavior. So that's first of all. But certainly there is also a cultural element, because if you look at blacks from, the days that they say were so terrible, when white supremacy was at its zenith, and blacks, they say, weren't treated very well, but everybody is dressed nice, like they're ready to go to church. You had a lot more black fathers around, and black families sticking together. People held themselves to a higher standard, whether that was their religious devotion, or really, trying to prove that they were, a lot of them wanted to prove they were as good as any white man. So they wanted to work hard towards that end. But, you have all of these leftist white people and Jews who wanted to frame it in a different way. Any standards or expectations of black behavior are racist, and you just don't understand them. And, so basically anything they do is okay. And then they went beyond that, and then they started glorifying the bad behavior through media, gangster rap and so on and so forth, portraying this image of the black criminal as being very potent and virile or whatever. So you have these young black kids that are growing up, and they probably, for various reasons, like I said, the genetic issue, the cultural issue, they probably were not born into a good situation. They probably were children of single mothers, or maybe they had relatives who are in and out of lockup or something. Maybe the father's not around. Really, really tough situation to begin with. And then they're given, so these guys raised by single mothers, they don't know how to be a man. And all of this messaging from the entertainment industry, largely run by Jews, is telling them the way to be a man, be a criminal, a gangster. And there's nothing to be ashamed of in behaving this way.
Hey, Jason, let's look at some of my bookmarks in Twitter. I'm not sure if you can see your screen. I'm just looking at just going down some of the things we talk about on the channel here. Court documents reveal J-Day youngins. Court documents reveal J-Day youngins, baby mother Jordan had an affair with both his brother and father, and the baby may not be his. When you read shit like this in Black America, what do you think about shit like this?
It's bad. I had an experience recently that might be familiar to you.
Yeah.
Before I decided to move to West Virginia, I actually went to Louisiana in the Baton Rouge area. And I was thinking about getting into property management. I wanted to look, because I have a friend who does that. He's a white nationalist, but he owns these houses that black people live in the ghetto. And
Really?
so I went with him, and we checked out some of these houses, and the behavior was just, I mean, these houses were just trashed so badly. And
Man,
yeah,
I
I
show
think
this
that
on my
speaks
stream
for itself.
Yo, I show this shit every day on the stream. Motherfuckers trashing houses, just blacks talking crazy, beating up each other, robbing each other. Every day, man. It's every day. It just seems like they can't make heads or tails out of the most simple aspects in life. Look at this picture on the screen. Look at this on the screen right here, Jason.
They're just shooting a guy at point blank range.
High schoolers.
Terrible.
That's at a school in Baltimore. And these blacks will be talking about racism. And look what he did. I mean, he gave him the coup de grace here. Look, Jason. The coup de grace right there. Where is it? There it is. And you say, damn, like that boy wake up in the morning screaming about racism. And yeah, I just want to. So you're talking about black women, right? And they have such a bad reputation. They're almost, yeah, I would say that their reputation is probably worse than women. I'm looking for Jasmine Crockett here. I want to get your thoughts on Jasmine Crockett. When you see black women behaving like that, what are your thoughts?
I mean, just politically, black women are the worst. They vote like, what is it, 96% for Democrats.
Yeah.
They are soldiers for that Democrat agenda, and they are totally race loyal. So, I mean, I guess if you're a black guy who likes black women, I mean, maybe that's a good thing, you know. But for me as a white man, I'm like, man, these people are tipping a lot of elections because they have no intellectual diversity. They're just a monolithic block, and they're very radical racially.
Yeah, they are very right. Have you, do you ever hear some of their commentary, like on Twitter, like their thoughts about white people and shit like that? They're
I've
more
seen
radical
that
than me.
Jasmine Crockett stuff, and she talks like a ghetto ratchet hoe, and she's a congressperson. It's unbelievable.
Check this out right here, Jason. Listen to this.
Um, no one could have told me that when I went down to Austin, now looks like a little bit over a year ago, that I would be running for Congress. It's just not what my plan was. But what I've always decided is that I would step up when there was a need. Listen, he up there, he's spewing all kinds of nonsense and bullshit. Let me just be real. And we weren't gonna sit for that shit. We wouldn't, you know.
It's like two different people.
Yeah,
Not-
that's interesting. And, you know, she's not the only politician who does that. Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton. It was especially humorous in the Hillary Clinton case, but there was there is a time and place for these people to talk like the college educated people that they are, and a place for them to talk black for effect, you know, to try and relate in a populist way to their base. And so that seems to be what she's doing there, is that, you know, yeah, perhaps maybe she's capable of more, but she is acting in a ghetto way because she is trying to seem down to earth to her constituency.
Yeah. I think for her to stay elected, she has to get more and more ghetto. I think her constituents are getting more and more ghetto. You know, here I talk about with the immigration coming in, I don't think the blacks can compete, to be honest with you. And I think what you're seeing with the blacks, like I showed you in the guy that's killing people, I think they're recognizing that there really isn't much of a future for them here. I run to a lot of migrants, immigrants, people like that. I show it right here on the stream. And they're doing even better than the blacks. And some of them are even like confused as to why the blacks can't seem to get it together here in America. And I think that is like at the root cause of many of the problems that we see. I'm not excusing the blacks. I'm saying that, you know, I just think that there really isn't a place for them here economically, it seems. They can't trade with anyone else.
Well, the racial situation in America is more complex than the black and white, literally, way that it's portrayed. Yes, there's this whole thing going on with black people and Hispanics. If you look at the ground zero for that, where these illegals are coming over in places like Compton and Los Angeles, I mean, there are brutal gangland wars between black Hispanics. You know, black people are getting their houses firebombed, and they're being driven out of neighborhoods where these Hispanics are taking over by force. And, you know, with the black male population, there's a little bit more of independent renegade streak. There's some of them who don't think in lockstep with the Democrat side of things, and so I think they were looking at what was going on with the illegal immigration and saying, this hurts us. It's going to make it harder for us to get these jobs. It's driving down wages. You know, for the street level blue collar black person, they are in direct competition with those Hispanic guys.
How do you think it's affecting white guys? How's the immigration affected you?
Well, I mean, it's totally destroying industries for the white working class and blue collar more generally. When I was living in the Northern Virginia area, I would go to sites where new homes are being built, subdivisions, just tons of homes being built. And every home that's being worked on in the block has crews that are exclusively Latino. I have a friend who lives in Woodbridge, Virginia, which is a little bit south of DC, and
It is, yeah.
He's a white guy, Italian, and his parents own a house there, but there's like no other white people around. Everybody is Hispanic, and therefore it's kind of like going to end their bloodline as white people. Like my friend, his son has a Hispanic girlfriend, and so that's the end of the white people in his family. But he doesn't have any options because there's no white women around.
Damn.
And I look at them as a vestige of what Northern Virginia used to be. There used to be at some point a blue collar white working class, and they've just been totally driven out. And it's going to happen anywhere that these Hispanics come. They're just like a swarm of locusts that are going to devour the prosperity for the native people wherever they go.
Is that what took you to West Virginia?
Well, I came to West Virginia because the real estate is much cheaper here, cheapest in the country, basically. Also, demographically, it's like 96% white. Also, politically, it's very conservative. Support for mass deportations is something like 93% here. I live in an urban-ish area, not necessarily my street, but I live in a city because I have to be for my line of work as a professional mover. So this is relatively more liberal than other parts of West Virginia, but it's still, far better for me than DC. I don't want to be around white liberals. I don't want to be somewhere with a massive ghetto. I like where I'm at now.
Did you ever come over to Southeast DC when you were in DC area?
Yeah, normally I'm pretty good at what I do as a professional mover, and so I'm able to command a certain hourly wage that I think is pretty good for me. And I've learned to tweak it so that people who are at a certain economic level won't be able to afford me. And that helps me a lot, because when I was first starting out, or when I would get desperate and lower my prices because maybe I got a once in a blue moon a bad review that lowered my ranking in the algorithm for the site that I get my jobs, I would get hired by these people in the ghetto parts of DC, or someone would hire me by mistake or whatever, and it would just be a mess, the whole place is trashed. You got to be careful not to trip over anything. You'd have problems sometimes with them paying you. You would do a flawless job, and they would find something to nitpick, and so if you're trying to get jobs to get a bunch of good reviews, like working for ghetto black people is the last thing you want to do, because they're just really miserable, unhappy people. And when they see a white face, they've got control over you for a little while when you're working for them. And so I think they like to work out some of their aggression in that situation. And it's hard to make them happy.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Hey, you got a question on the screen. How do we deal with the low IQ issue in our population?
What are you talking about? The black population?
Well, that's probably the biggest
or just in general, because there's two different things. Of course, there's the IQ issue with Black people, but the IQ in general is going down because we don't have the same natural and sexual selection pressures that we did back in the day, a long time ago, before our world was had all the sharp edges sanded down, and you could die for being stupid. There was an evolutionary advantage to being smart, and people who played the game and made a good living and lived longer would have a better chance of procreating and spreading their DNA through the population. And people who were stupid and died young weren't able to achieve a certain level of success in which they could father children. Those people, procreated less. And now,
let me ask you a better question.
Yeah,
you said you're in West Virginia, right? And I've done a show a couple of times with a guy who described himself as a poor white trash. How would you describe the difference in poor white trash versus poor Black trash? How about that?
That's a difficult question because, Black gangster culture is actually really popular with white trash. So they are consciously mimicking Black behavior and Black culture, which sort of blurs the line. There's certainly some overlap in terms of like their homes are both a wreck, and there's issues with weight management. These people just eat total garbage, and the same with Blacks, and poor whites, as they go into these convenience stores and they're not able to really think ahead of time and make smart choices that will pay off in the long term, because they need short-term dopamine hits. They just do what feels good in the moment.
That's right. Mellow Yellow in Virginia, right? A Mountain Dew or something.
I still like most poor white people. I think that they could be a lot better than what they are if the government would uphold higher standards. They shouldn't allow people to eat some of the crap that is making these people so obese.
Could you live around poor white people?
What's that?
Could you live around poor white people?
Yeah, there's lots of poor white people here in West Virginia, and I don't mind them. I like them. I wouldn't necessarily want to live on a street where it's nothing but like poor white people. It depends. Some poor white people have self-respect. There's no doubt about that, and those are good people. And then there's some who have more.
Are there shootings in poor white neighborhoods?
I don't. You're just not going to see the same level of violence in a white person neighborhood, regardless of their income level. It's the reason thing, but it's a matter of degree.
The reason I'm asking this is because you hear Blacks all the time say white people commit violence too. You hear that, right? White people do this too, and so we want to hammer through some of the narrative. What's it like living among poor white people? If is it as violent as it is the Black neighborhood? You say no.
No, definitely not.
Right. And dysfunction may be about the same, but the violence isn't there. You can live there pretty much in peace.
Poor people have a lot of things in common, regardless of race. But I think the way that their behavior is expressed in that circumstance has a lot to do with genetics. So the genetic disposition of Black people heightens some of those negative qualities that you associate with poor people.
So this would be like heightened genetic behavior right here. When we see something like this.
Accept your fatality.
Bus driver.
Accept your fatality, nigga. Accept your fatality, nigga. Accept your fatality, nigga. Accept
that would be like an expression of genetics, in your opinion. You don't see white kids doing that kind of shit on a regular basis.
Well, some, but it's a matter of degree. It's a disposition, and black people have a much higher propensity for that type of behavior.
You have a question on the screen. Why are white folks scared of Hispanics? Why not do all the same things done to black people to get rid of Hispanics?
I don't know that white people are necessarily scared of Hispanics, although I guess in some communities that could be the case where there's MS-13 and dangerous criminal gangs moving in. But I think that it's what Elon Musk recently called suicidal empathy. It's that white people try to see things from other people's perspective so much that they don't care about their own, and they would destroy themselves to save somebody else in the way that they allow these open borders that have been a gift to these Hispanics. In places like California, which are obviously at the epicenter of this immigration crisis, they're just making it much, much worse for themselves by allowing them to vote when they're not even legal citizens, giving them free health care. So if you're somebody who's in Central America and you need some expensive operations, you just probably in your interest to pay a coyote to smuggle you across the border because whatever amount you have there is going to pay for itself many, many times over when you get the American taxpayers to pay for all of this free medical care.
Hey,
I don't think that they're scared. It's just they're too nice. They're suicidally empathic.
We got a lot of questions coming in. Here's another one. Were the tactics of Charlottesville in error? It seems better to create groups of like-minded racial people focus on mutual benefit rather than overt racial confrontation.
Well, I think that the primary problem with Charlottesville is that it had an incorrect assumption about America's commitment to free speech. I idealized the free speech movement. I'd seen documentaries and news reports about the ACLU defending the Nazis who wanted to march in the Jewish suburb of Skokie, that famous case. I was really into stand-up comedy, and as you know, there's a lot of stand-up comedians, whether it's George Carlin or Richard Pryor or trying to think of the Jewish guy, but there's people of all these different backgrounds who have really gotten up on stage and said things that were controversial. The authorities sometimes tried to arrest them for this, and so it made stand-up comedy a focal point of but the assumption was that because in the past police had separated sides and allowed controversial events to go forward, that they would do that in Charlottesville. It's a completely different animal to say, well, we're going to bring a bunch of people into a park, knowing that the police are going to wash their hands of it, when you have hundreds of violent extremists in opposition to you. Because these people in Antifa, they came armed with semi-automatic rifles. They came armed with bricks and pepper spray.
What about the fire thrower? What about the flamethrower?
Yeah, there was even a guy named Corey Long, a black guy, who used a lighter and an aerosol can.
Yeah, we showed him earlier.
A plume of flames at the protesters while they were being driven out of the park by police, and he was only given a little slap on the wrist, a disorderly conduct charge. I mean, that's assault with a deadly weapon.
Yeah, we showed him earlier, and I'll pull him up here for people that are looking here. Here's the flamethrower guy here. Let me share the screen. Here's the flamethrower. Here's the flamethrower guy. This is the what did you say his name is? Corey something?
Corey Long.
Corey Long. Here's the flamethrower guy, the black guy, shooting the flames out. And they probably arrested the white guys.
Well, there was a white guy who had a concealed carry, and when he saw that, he took out his gun and he fired a warning shot into the dirt. That guy was named Richard Preston, and so he was only doing that to protect those people who were on the receiving end of that flame. They charged the white guy with every felony they could come up with. They charged him for something like discharging a firearm within certain number of feet of a school, even though there was no school in session that day, obviously, with the rally. And so, that was one of the most lopsided judicial prosecutions in the whole bunch, was that they charged the guy who started the thing using the flamethrower with only a little disorderly conduct. And then the guy who fired a warning shot, he could have shot the guy in the head. He didn't do that. He didn't want to hurt him. But they used that to hurt the guy and put him in prison.
Wait a minute. Is this him right here?
Who?
Is this the guy you're speaking of right here?
Yeah, that's Richard Preston. He's the guy who fired the warning shot. He went to prison.
Look, how the Klansman, was he a Klansman or they just calling him that?
I think he really was, to be honest with you.
How a Klansman who shot toward a black man in Charlottesville ended up at the African American Museum, and there's a picture of him. There he is.
Yeah, they go run into this guy, Daryl.
Oh shit, that's him.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
Yeah,
And
that
he
was
went
the
to
event
prison?
right there.
How long did he go to prison?
You see a guy firing a flamethrower at a crowd of people. That's a hero, whether he's a Klansman or not. That was a heroic thing for him to do.
Damn. And how much time?
Look at this goofball trying to do public relations for himself. But while I'm thinking about it, Corey Long was part of a group of black guys who showed up to the rally, not really to protest. They intended to, break the law in order to hamper the people who were trying to do the protest that day. It was Corey Long and some other folks, including DeAndre Harris. You may know that because other than Heather Heyer, he was the most famous so-called victim of the so-called white supremacists that day. But it was something that the media very closely guarded the narrative on, and they portrayed the whole thing in a false light. Corey Long and DeAndre Harris were assaulting people throughout the day, stealing their flags, setting them on fire with no police intervention. And when the crowd was dispersed and people were trying to get back to their vehicles in the parking garage, Corey Long and DeAndre Harris were following people and cursing at them, threatening them. And these white guys didn't react. So DeAndre Harris took a mag light and he crushed this guy in the head with it. At that point, a number of guys rushed in and they beat him up for a bit. They probably went a little bit too far. So I'm not condoning that, but it was not as they were portraying it, like just a bunch of racist white guys looking for any excuse to beat up an innocent white guy. This was somebody who was looking for a fight, who was taunting them, who drew first blood, and then tried to act like a victim after the fact. So the new news that's come out recently, my friend Jack Corbin, the Antifa hunter, did a background check. So this guy, DeAndre, he raised like $177,000 in GoFundMe money after this attack.
Yeah, I saw that.
And since then, he's been convicted of felony embezzlement. He stole a bunch of stuff from, I guess, a Verizon store that he was working at in 2022. Now in 2024, he's charged with domestic violence, assault on a woman, and I guess assault. So he's been very busy.
I see you have a question up here. Do you feel a culpability involving the protests? And why did you tweet Emily Gorczynski's address, which resulted in her being swatted?
I didn't do that. These Antifa people were trying after the rally to find any way to lock me up, and because they had friends in the prosecutor's office, they just got one phony charge after another that I had to spend my time and money knocking down. And there was an account that was for an organization, a new activist organization that I set up. And I asked this guy, I didn't really know him that well, which was a mistake, but I directed him to open up a Twitter account and just tweet about whatever political stuff just to grow this account. I didn't have any oversight over what he was doing. And this dumbass tweeted the address of this person. And then Gorczynski, assumed that I was the one operating that account when that wasn't the case. And so they drug my name through the mud, filed charges against me, wrote about it in the paper. They called it cyber stalking. And yet they dropped the charge because they had no evidence that I was running that account, and I wasn't. But of course, once they realized that it was somebody else, they had no interest in pursuing a prosecution, because all it was about getting at me. They didn't care about doing that to anybody else.
You have another question up here. Well, best delete the question he's answering on the screen. Okay, I got people giving me directions here. That's correct. I have to leave it up there for you. Okay, here's another question. Would you consider yourself a racially aware libertarian or an ethno-nationalist?
Probably more of an ethno-nationalist with some paleo-conservative tendencies. But I realize that ethno-nationalism is not necessarily politically viable now. I think that it's still important to stake out a very aggressive position, because it's just like, if you were following Trump talking about the art of the deal, you don't start out with a very reasonable position. You ask for the moon, and that way, when the negotiation happens, you get a little bit of a better deal at the end. And so that's my perspective on it. I don't think that there's anything illegitimate about being an ethnic nationalist. Black nationalists like Malcolm X are considered, totally legitimate civil rights icons. So yeah. I think there's definitely a place for somebody who is a white nationalist staking out a similar position in defense of their people.
Hey, do you mind taking questions directly from people?
No, it's fine.
All right, let me, guys, one by one, you come up, get your question up, drop you down. Let Jason ask the question for you, because I'm going through them here. Man, I really appreciate you coming up. I've probably been reaching out to you, probably cyber stalking you, as they say. Jason, another one. Do you think Thomas Russo is a Fed? Yeah, that's a good question there. You know who Thomas Russo is, right?
Yes.
You think he's a Fed?
I don't think so. I don't think he's a very honest guy, though. I've had some experience with him where I've seen him lie when he's on streams. So I don't trust him, but I don't have any knowledge of him being a Fed.
While we're waiting on someone to pop up, I have a question for you. Heather Heyer, do you think James Fields, right? You think he should have gotten 250 years in prison for that?
No, I think it was overkill, especially in context of other similar vehicular homicides. I break this all down in my book. If you're interested in the James Fields Heather Heyer thing, I would highly recommend that, because we go step by step through all of the evidence about the James Fields thing and sort of recreate it in a sort of like a Oliver Stone JFK kind of way. And also, there's a comparison of a bunch of different news stories where people ran over white Republicans because they were white Republicans or whatever.
Really?
And were treated just with kid gloves. So, I think there was overkill with Fields. There's also a mitigating circumstance that I don't think was appreciated, in that you had, hundreds of armed political extremists, with baseball bats, guns, all manner of things. You can see a lot of those there in that clip you're playing. And they were roaming during a state of emergency when they were directed by the police not to be in the streets. But because of the political bias of the authorities, they were given carte blanche to basically act as a military junta in the streets of Charlottesville that day. And so, I'm sure felt very threatened. And when he tried to turn onto that 4th Street where the accident happened, there were a bunch of people who shouldn't have been in the streets blocking traffic. And so he was trapped there, and people could look in the window and see he was with the permanent protesters because he had a white shirt on.
Right. That's right.
A so-called fashy haircut that marked him out. And there were people like Redneck Revolt militiamen, Dwayne Dixon, a communist Antifa, who claimed that they pointed rifles at him. So if that's true, you know why he might have been scared.
Didn't they hit the back of his car? Didn't they hit the back of his car?
They definitely did before and certainly after the accident as well. And when he was hit before the accident, the sound made it sounded like a gunshot going on.
Sounded like a gunshot, right?
You already have this environment where you're scared, you're in a strange city, you're trapped, surrounded by your political enemies who are armed to the teeth. Somebody allegedly, has threatened you with a rifle already, and then you hear that assault on your vehicle that sounds like a gunshot. For me, those are mitigating circumstances. And the fact that the authorities put him in that situation in the first place because the police stood down because of their objective of sabotaging the rally. He never should have been put in that situation in the first place.
That street should have been blocked off, if I'm not mistaken. I think
and it was at one point. It was blocked off with a sawhorse.
Sawhorse.
And there was a police officer who was stationed to guard it, and she abandoned her post. They didn't report.
She was afraid, and she ran off. Right? Is that why she left? That I do remember that. We have someone up here that wants to ask a question here. Orthodox, what's up?
Mr. Galt, I'm Mr. Kessler. First, thank you both for your time. I do have 2 questions, if that's okay. The second one I'm going to ask first, because the current topic. What should ethno-nationalists do or protesters do when faced with the government corruption that you faced at Charlottesville? Like with the police being told to back down if we're advocating for our people?
Well, it's a very difficult situation because you don't want to abdicate your rights, but you have to be very careful about how to express them, because you have to understand that the law might be on the book that you have a right to free speech, that the authorities will protect you from violence, in other words, a heckler's veto. But in practice, everything in the system is going to be used against you, and they will look for any excuse to arrest you. Some people, like the Patriot Front guys, they might decide, well, we still want to go out and march and whatever. And I'm glad there are some people to do that. I think that the risk is too high, frankly, and it breaks my heart to have to say, that I don't think that it's safe and I'm not going to do it. But that's where we are right now. I think that you can still get a lot done online and trying to reach people in a more safe environment where you can't be caught up in these prosecution traps.
Fair. And the first question I had earlier, I don't know if Mr. Galton had asked, if there are any, what do you think some changes to our voting laws and our electoral process to protect? Because you mentioned illegal immigrants voting in liberal states and cities. What do you think we should do to stop that?
Well, I mean, ultimately, I think that we need to move away from democracy for a little while. I think that we need to suspend the electoral process, have one, basically like the Romans did it. The Romans would have, they actually had a position called dictator, which is a scary word now. But in times of great distress, they would suspend their normal political process and allow the dictator to come in and fix everything. And then they were expected to give up that power again. And so the famous example of this is Cincinnatus, whom the city of Cincinnati is named for. He saved the republic. And then he returned to his farm like George Washington would later, abdicating his power and giving it back to the people. The reason that I would advocate a step that radical is because I think that our democracy has been hopelessly compromised. It's just not legitimate when you have one side allowing an invasion, a foreign invasion, in order to disenfranchise the native-born population. And that's what the Democrats are doing. They want the illegal immigration to happen. You saw those numbers during the Biden administration go through the roof to historic highs. And they do that because they know that population is more likely to vote for them. There's a number of other ways in which there are allegations of election tampering and so on and so forth. But, at its root, you just cannot have fair elections until you send these people home. They all need to be sent home, whether they're considered American citizens or not. That whole anchor baby thing, there's very few countries on earth that'll allow this birthright citizenship thing, and that needs to be canceled. And we need to get rid of the people, just send them back home. And only then I think we can start to look at reintroducing the republic. But I think even then we might need to balkanize. I don't think that people who hate each other the way that different parts of America should live in the same country. Elections are supposed to peacefully settle disagreements between people who might not agree, but they both have one another's best interest in mind. Right now, we're using democracy as an alternative to open warfare. You have people who hate each other's guts and would want to kill one another if there was a new civil war, but they're settling for when they get political power, they will use the prosecutors to prosecute their political enemies, like what's happened to the people who are at Charlottesville, like what's happened to Donald Trump, and everything that's going on with the FBI.
J6 people.
Yeah, the J6 people. That's just totally untenable. So you have to fix these things because the democracy right now is broken. Democracy is not in and of itself a good thing. If it produces consistently bad outcomes, it needs to be fixed.
Let me ask you this question: would you even feel comfortable coming back to DC to protest, like the outcome of an election, like the J6 people?
Well, the DC is probably safer than Charlottesville for sure. You know, DC obviously is very far left. It's white people are a minority there, but they also have a much more professional grade of law enforcement there than these Barney Fifes in Charlottesville, as you can imagine, because they have to have people who can handle the responsibility of dealing with the most powerful political leaders in the country, who are used to controversial protests of all stripes going on there all the time. There's not going to be a single day where there's not a protest happening in Lafayette Square outside the White House. So I honestly, DC, you could do a lot worse than DC if you're going to do a protest.
Yeah, it just seemed like protesting against the federal government. They have the ability to really entrap you, or just snare you the way that they did the January 6 people. I'll be very wary of, like you see Enrique Otario, even just the prison that they put them in, the over there in the gulags in DC. You might get fair treatment outside of DC. I don't know.
Yeah, I think Otario is asking for trouble. He got released from prison, which should have been, a miracle, the greatest thing that's ever happened to the guy in his life. And then he just goes right back to DC and is getting more charges filed against him. Because I've been in that situation. If you're going to do it, you got to have a permit. You got to run it by the police and make sure the police are there to keep the sides separated. Because if you don't have that, you're going to get protesters attacking you. You're going to have to use self-defense. And no court in a liberal jurisdiction is going to recognize your self-defense. Even if somebody was beating the shit out of you and you punched to get them off, if you are a quote-unquote white supremacist, that there's going to be no sympathy for you. They're going to find some way to prosecute you. They're going to say, they're going to make it up, say, oh, well, he called him the N-word or something. They'll do what they have to do to put you behind bars.
That is true. Hey, man, would you like to come over? We're going to have an open panel. I'm sure a lot of people would love to ask you even more questions here. Some may have been too shy to ask you the questions since we have you right here one-on-one. But we're live right now on the other panel. Would you like to come over for a few minutes? I can put the link in the chat. I can send it to you. Come over, and I'm sure people have really enjoyed this here.
Sure.
All right, Jason. Any last words? Let me bring up Orthodox one at a time. You have any other last words, questions you have for Jason?
Oh no. Thank you both for your time, and that's pretty much it for right now.
Thank you, Orthodox. All right. Any last words, Jason, before we go over to the big panel here?
Well, to see any of my ongoing projects, to read some of my articles, get a link to my book about Charlottesville, which I would highly recommend, go to jasonkessler.us, jasonkessler.us, and you'll find you can watch my weekly live streaming program, Future Shock. We covered the joint address with a really great commentator, host of the Political Festival, James Edwards, this past Wednesday. It's every Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. EST. We covered this dud with the Epstein reveal that was a bunch of nothing.
It was a dud, yeah.
Covered the imbroglio between Vladimir Zelensky and Trump and Vance in the White House. A lot of good stuff. So go to jasonkessler.us. Follow me on all the social media sites that you are on. I'm probably on several of the ones you use, and subscribe to get the weekly videos.
Man, you have to come back again. We stream a lot over here, and you're always welcome to hop up on the panel. We have a lot of hot topics. You come up, give your insight on. Matter of fact, let's do that right now. You go over to the other panel, and we have a commercial. We actually want to show it to you. I think Portia made an intro. Yeah, that's what you call it. Hey guys, thank you for joining. Man, this has been great. Thank you again, Jason. And I'm gonna hop over to the other panel. Hope to see you there, Jason.
Sure. I'm just going to use the bathroom real quick, and then I'll click on the link.
Sounds great. Thank you, guys. Hey.
Biden is asleep. Kamala is at a dance party with Beyonce. 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 Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. 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 Party with Beyonce. 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 Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. 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 Party with Beyonce. Beyonce.
Stop. Carry on.
Dance party with Beyonce. Beyonce. 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 Beyonce.
Hold up.
Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. 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 Party with Beyonce. 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 Beyonce.